A couple of years ago, I was cordially invited by Bart Valdhuisen from Blender Nation to write an article about making 3D jewelry in Blender. In today's tutorial, I'm going to put in action several of the concepts that I talked about in that article. And here we have a perfect example, because honestly, ask yourself, does this make justice to the design of this ring? This design deserves a lot better. And that's why we're here today. Let's get started. Add mesh circle, 6 vertices. I want it to be bigger than the motifs on the ring. This gets an array and a second range. Let's be very precise here. The maximum zoom in Blender has a fixed scale, which is very practical. Now, for the camera here, I'm going to go with a portrait orientation. Move it to the floor, and let's adopt the count. And we can see here already why it's important to have the field of the camera already in place. Just for good measures, this gets a solidify modifier. Save and be happy. Now let's go to shading. The gold material is going to be called carbide black. So saturation 0, value almost black, just to set the mood. The floor, let's go some metallic, lower the roughness. Now I'm going to add a bevel to get the edges. This means we're going to give it a bevel modifier. Also, let's add the RGB and ambient occlusion. Then we're going to use a Voronoi texture for a bump map. Distance to height, normal to normal. Let's invert the distance. I'm going to use an F1 smooth. Now here I'm going to copy the Voronoi texture. I'm going to use a math converter. I'm going to multiply. So for this, I want something a lot bigger. Less details, very probably. There, connect. The multiply again. Now I'm going to use a brightness and contrast node because I don't want the bump to be everywhere. Now we can see I can tweak where the bump works. Removes the bump here and there. And here I can multiply the bump. Now I want the floor to be very dark also. This is starting to be more like it. Now let's go to world. So remember, I used the Brown Photo Studio 02. Okay, on the world, I'm going to give a 0 saturation. And now in render properties, I'm going to go to film transparent because the background is interfering a lot with the visuals of my render scene. Let's remove it, making it transparent. Save and be happy. Good, but this is not much richer than before. We need to model some elements. Let's go to layout. I'm going to copy the body of the ring, move it to a new collection. Let's go to edit mode. For this element, I'm going to keep this part only. I'm going to close here and start subdividing. I'm going to slightly bevel. Here I can remove the solidify modifier. Let's have a look at the normals. Element 01. Now inside here, let's make a copy of this element. Element 02. In edit mode, I'm going to keep the outside only. I'm going to remove the bevel and the solidify modifier. I'm going to convert to mesh. Now in edit mode, I'm going to extrude on the z-axis. Now this border gets a solidify modifier. Now it gets a bevel modifier, and subdivisions will have a smooth shading. This is going to get a mirror on the z-axis. Then I'm going to make a copy, rotate on the y-axis, 90 degrees. Next element, let's make a copy of this. Let's remove the rotation. Let's go to edit mode. Here I'm going to keep the inside only. Work on the thickness, set the normals to the outside, put the rotation back in, and now let's add a mirror on the X and Z axis to fill the gaps. Next element, let's make a copy of this, and here we have a boolean. I'm going to ask the intersection, and these are exactly the gaps of this element. Then I'm going to use a remesh modifier with a smooth modifier. Now this element, let's make a copy, element 07. Let's remove the rotation. Here I'm going to keep only the inside. I'm going to create a small roof. Check the normals. Let's put the rotation back in. And now this gets a mirror on the X and Z axis from the center. Then the body of the ring. Let's make a copy. Here I want the intersection of this boolean to get these engravings. Now this can be made into a mesh. Then let's get a remesh and a smooth modifier. This is element 08. So what I did is create filling or border elements. And for that, let's create a new material. And we're going to use this material on these new elements. They're going to have variations. And for now, I'm just in the viewport, adapting the viewport display color. Now it's time to see these new elements into action in the shading. Let's save and be happy. Good. This won't be metallic anymore. Then we're going to start from slightly orange. We're going to remove the ambient occlusion and we're going to send the color to the emission color. And let's start working on the strength. I'm going to treat the alpha also. Here I'm going to replace the Gabor with a Voronoi. So obviously in some places I need to do something about the mapping of the texture on the element. For that I'm going to use a UV project modifier and I'm going to create a cube that I will be able to move and scale to treat the UV maps for each element and adapt the mapping specifically as needed. Because here we can see that the scale of the Voronoi bump map texture is much different than maybe here on this element where we already see some slight waves as an effect of the bump, but on other elements we don't see much of the bump map, and that's because the mapping, the UV mapping, is different because the geometry is very different and the scale and the position, the orientation and all of that. So the UV project modifier is going to help me with this issue. So here in the modifier, I'm going to use my cube, and now here and then here for the coordinates, I'm going to use the UV vector, and we can start seeing the difference. Let's tweak my cube now, and now we can see the importance of that modifier for UV mapping, and that's very practical instead of trying to make UV unwrapping in edit mode and fighting against a useless problem. Save and be happy. But I want it also to affect the strength of the emission. So here I'm going to use a brightness and contrast node to tweak the new emissive situation. Just like this, we can see the variations. Save and be happy. Now I'm going to select all the material nodes. I'm going to copy this to the next material, and I'm going to tweak the color slightly more orange. Then I'm going to apply the same emissive material here on the inside elements. I'm going to copy the nodes from the first material, another variation right here. When you can't see the result, set the UV project, and here we go. Make these small sides the emissive material. Let's save and be happy. Now this is just the beginning. The rest of the scene, the environment, is totally deprived of life. And if we want to create an interesting render and an even more interesting animation, there's a lot of work to be done around the ring. This is the digital frontier. And that's exactly why I said that my life is in between two worlds. In the 3D art universe, I need to go out, and I need to go a lot outside of my box, because now there's a lot of work to be done that has nothing to do with jewelry design. And that goes way beyond. You need to break walls. You need to move frontiers. And even if many people are starting to use and abuse AI, that won't change much. This 3D model This 3D ring can be 3D printed and manufactured in gold. And at the end of the day, anyway, that's the real business. But without making a fantastic effort on the 3D art of my jewelry designs, I would not be the Jewelry Jedi at all. And the story would be a lot different. Now, obviously, AI is disrupting a lot the 3D artwork workflow, but artificial intelligence suddenly becomes conscious. Skynet is not interested in manufacturing real life jewelry. Businesses are going to need jewelers with their magical hands for many decades to come, and robots surely can save, but robots can't be happy. So here it is, my fellow humans. Save and be happy.